Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry for little bit late. Actually, in this time, now our chief patron did not join now, so actually I will wait for him. So, good afternoon, distinguished Vice Chancellor, Association, our principal, participant, and my dear colleagues, and all other here. It is a glorious moment to extend my warm wishes on behalf of the Raniganj Girls College. I am Bimal Banerjee, an assistant professor, Department of Philosophy, Raniganj Girls College, and also convener of this webinar. Welcome you all this in this two-day international webinar. Today, 18 January. Now, the time is 12:15. I want to convey my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for taking time out and being here today. It gives me tremendous contentment to be presenting the welcome speech among the most esteemed personalized who here won accolades in their respective fields. There are many participants joined here. Our speaker and our colleagues and some my colleagues and supported team joined here. We want to express our heartfelt thanks to our principal madam, Dr. Chobide, IQC coordinator, Ms. Jyotika Wahala madam, and organizing committee members, and also all technical supported team and organizing such as nice webinar. Special thanks to ICPR New Delhi for financial support. Now, I would like to request our principal madam to deliver welcome address of this webinar. Over to you, madam. Please, madam.
Thank you, Vimal. Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to this 2 days international webinar on exploring some aspects of contemporary philosophy, organized by the Department of Philosophy, Raniganj Girls College, and sponsored by Indian Council of Philosophical Research. Every year, the Department of Philosophy, Raniganj Girls College, makes arrangement to celebrate World Philosophy Day, an international day proclaimed by UNESCO to be celebrated every Thursday of November. But no such arrangements could be made last year due to COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, this webinar is a belated attempt on their part to celebrate that day. On behalf of Raniganj Girls College and the Department of Philosophy, Raniganj Girls College, I cordially welcome all the participants of this webinar. First, I would like to thank Professor Sadhan Chakraborty, the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Kazi Nazrul University, as well as the Chief Patron of this webinar. I welcome and extend my sincerest greetings and wishes to him and also to the distinguished speaker of this webinar, Dr. Dilip Kumar Mahanto, Professor, Department of Philosophy, Calcutta University, former Vice Chancellor of Sanskrit College and University, Kolkata. Dr. Debendranath Tewari, Professor, Department of Philosophy and Religion, Banaras Hindu University, and Dr. Govindur Sharon Upadhyay, Acharya of Philosophy, Tribhuvan University, Kathmandu, Nepal. We are extremely grateful to them for the time they have managed to take out of their hectic schedule for this webinar. I also welcome all the delegates who have joined this webinar from different parts of the world. I also congratulate Mr. Bimal Banerjee, the convener of this webinar for his noble initiative. I especially congratulate Mr. Rahul Bhattacharya for his technical supports. I would also like to take this opportunity to express my gratefulness to Indian Council of Philosophical Research for their patronage and support. I would like to welcome all the distinguished dignitaries coming from different parts of the world. I also welcome all the dignitaries from various disciplines and each one of those who have enabled this occasion with their gracious presence. Finally, I appreciate the enthusiasm and zeal of all the scholars and students who have joined this webinar despite all the challenges and inconveniences. I sincerely hope that this webinar will be an immensely enriching experience for all the participants. Once again, I congratulate the organizer and wish the webinar a grand success. Thank you all. Over to Bimal.
Thank you. Thank you, respected madam. And many thanks to our principal madam. She inspired by me this seminar, and for that reason, today we organized that type of webinar. And our VC sir just called in few minutes ago when he will join very soon, and he will hear we will hear his valuable speech shortly. So thank you, madam, again, and thank you all our participants, our resource person, and our colleagues and technical supporter. Also, again, we very thankful to us, and special thanks to ICPR New Delhi. Now we will wait for few minutes, please. Now we are very much glad to announce that uh, their response various part of India and as well as abroad from various members and participants joined here. And we are thankful to all those participants who have shown their interest and joined this webinar. Now we are going to our introduced our today's speaker. Now, our first speaker, Professor Dilip Kumar Mohanto. He is a very eminent scholar in Indian philosophy and contemporary philosophy and also analytic philosophy. And he is professor of Calcutta University and also former vice chancellor of the college and university, Sanskrit University, Kolkata. And today, yeah, also he joined here. Thank you, sir, for joining us. And our second speaker, Professor Devendranath Tiwari, Professor, Department of Philosophy and Religion, Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. And he also very eminent scholar from contemporary philosophy, analytic philosophy, and uh, he many here visiting professor in abroad also. So today's two speaker here join us, and they will deliver their speech in our today's webinar, the contemporary uh, area. And today's two-day international webinar on exploring some aspects of contemporary philosophy, sponsored by Indian Council of Philosophical Research, New Delhi, and organized by Department of Philosophy, Raniganj Girls College. Thank you all for taking time out and being here today. Thank you. Okay, uh, now we'll start our today's uh, first session. The first speaker of the webinar, Dr. Dilip Kumar Mohanto, Professor, Department of Philosophy, Calcutta University, and he is a very renowned author also, and he uh, works in philosophy many ways. Now I would like to request to first speaker, Professor Dilip Kumar Mohanto. Over to you, sir. Please.
Okay. Thank you, respected Principal Madam of Raniganj College, Dr. Chobi De, Mr. Bimal Banerjee, the convener of the seminar, distinguished philosophers, my very old friend, Professor Ponira Silvam, I see. Very good afternoon, sir. And also, I see Professor Osit Das, my former colleague and now director of Indian Institute of Social Reform and Research. It's really a very interesting time for me because then some of my former students are here also. Now all of them are teachers of philosophy. And it's sponsored by ICPR. Professor Ponira Silvam Sivanandam is also a member like me in the council. So it's ICPR's session rather. And the Raniganj Girls College I never visited, but I presume once I was there in Asansol, the new university, where my friend Professor Chakraborty is the Vice Chancellor. Anyway, perhaps he is engaged with some of the more important works. We are missing him. The topic that I have selected is not very much, critical or evaluative, rather very informative. Why I have chosen this, let me first clarify. The Acharya Brajendranath Shil's philosophy. Brajendranath Shil, he is the first person in this subcontinent, not only subcontinent, the whole of Asia, who introduced philosophy as a methodological device for understanding science, and who started comparative philosophy in the University of Calcutta. The earlier name was Ethical and Moral Science, not philosophy, because what you know as science today was included in philosophy. Natural philosophy includes physics, chemistry, everything. When Ashutosh Mukherjee started a philosophy department for the new chair, the first chair in Asia, King George V, professor of mental and moral philosophy in 1912, Shil joined as the first chair and head. So he designed it in such a way that each philosophy can promote service to all the branches of human knowledge, especially the sciences. Shil was a polymath. So today my lecture will be mostly informative because we speak of contemporary philosophy, modern philosophy, and we forget Shil. Without Shil, there is no modern philosophy, no comparative philosophy, no philosophy in modern sense in Asia at all. But unfortunately, most of his manuscripts were lost. And we did not have this manuscript much of him. Only some of his lectures are survived. So out of these lectures and his interaction with the students, I shall try to present a glimpse of his philosophical ideas. And why informative I'm telling you, because the present generation researcher must know. Present generations of researcher must know his contribution. At least they might be interested, which whatever is available nowadays. I remember his lecture delivered in Bombay University as convocation address in 1926. He cautioned, there he cautioned the English government that don't interfere politically in academics. Public institution means it is running by public's exchequer. It is not minister's money, it is public money. And the organization, the institution who takes this money is responsible to give adjustment. And there should not be any political interference for running academics. So academics should be free, research should be free. You know, the academicians must enjoy freedom of ideas. This question he gave in his convocation address in 1926. So this is still relevant in India, I think more relevant today. Secondly, in the name of many norms and religions, we forget reasoning. So everything is to be judged critically. You know, criticism or logic is the essence of science and philosophy. So this is another aspect that we got from him. The third is the humanism. He was much influenced by Bodhisattva ideal. For humanity, your service is for humanity. These are the three broad, areas where he developed his philosophy. Today, I shall try to give just a bird's eye view and few names only. Unfortunately, long 14 years I worked on B.N. Shill's collections to present a collected works of B.N. Shill in 5 volumes. First volume I submitted to Asiatic Society in 2015. Unfortunately, the society is yet to publish it. And nobody took interest in our country. Although the foreign publishers are interested, I don't want to hand over this golden materials to foreign publishers because the price will be so high that my countrymen will not be able to publish it. I do not know whether any vice chancellor would be interested to come forward to publish it, or in our country, this so-called public institution, they are running by public exchequer, but lacking by genuine interest, academic interest and genuine interest in academics. This is another cause of downfall of our country. I believe our country will never be a developed country unless and until we shift ourselves from this wrong attitude. And for our direction, we can take initiative from readings of B.N. Shill. However, I have tried to write something which I am presenting now. Namaskar, Mr. Vice Chancellor. I have started. I waited for you. So this is the title, Acharya Brajendranath Shill's Philosophy. Sir B.N. Shill was an illustrious son of 19th century Bengal. One of the earliest followers of Cometian positivism and a distinguished lawyer of Calcutta, Mahendranath Shill was his father and Radharani Devi, a homemaker, was his mother. Rajendranath Shill was his elder brother, and Shill had 2 other sisters also. Shill was a torchbearer of the Enlightenment in India, an encyclopedia of modern sciences and different branches of Oriental learning, in addition to being a world-famous philosopher. Regarding wide depth and originality of scholarship, Shill was perhaps, in his own time, he was a polyglot, mastering more than 10 Indian and European languages, and a polymath with a commanding knowledge of many subjects. However, the major portions of his later manuscripts were lost due to a mistaken assumption of his domestic health in Mysore, as mentioned by Shil in one of his conversations with his former student Rasbihari Das. তিনি তার গৃহে যিনি সাহায্যকারী ছিলেন, নতুন বই এসছে, উনি ভেবেছেন শিল যেহেতু কিছু লুজ কাগজে লিখতেন, তিনি সুতো দিয়ে বেঁধে রাখতেন তার ম্যানাস্ক্রিপ্ট গুলো, তো তার গৃহ যে সহায়ক সে তিনি ভেবেছেন যে এগুলো মানে অপ্রয়োজনীয় কাগজ, হি ডেস্ট্রয়েড ইট টু, এবং নতুন বই রাখার জন্য এইভাবে তার মেইন ম্যানাস্ক্রিপ্ট নষ্ট হয়ে যায়। It is reported that Shil kept his handwritten notes in a bookshelf, and while making room for new books, the domestic help thought that the bundle of papers was crushed and destroyed it. Some of his works which have survived in print were written as addresses for different conferences. The number of his printed works in journals and anthologies in English is 43 and in Bengali 12, so far as I have gathered. From his published works, it appears that Shil was a votary of free thinking. As a thinker, he believed in the right to dissent, criticize, and think afresh. Discussion, debate, and dissent are three sure marks of cultural democracy of India. Those who are in students of Indian philosophy, we know this rule of opposition is very important in Indian philosophy called Purva Paksha. Unless you satisfied with the argument your Purva Paksha, your own position cannot be established. Opposition is the mirror for a thinker and conscience for a doer, like politicians in true democracy. Shil was always free from commitment to any closed system of truth. He has an emblem of an ideal teacher. He was addressed in the vernacular as Acharya, a designation of respect in Indian culture. The exact number of his publications cannot be ascertained right now due to the lack of historical records and preservation of his published essays. Shil influenced the Vedan Society of India by his reflective short articles written in Bengali and English. I shall now try to give a brief introduction to the contents of some of Shil's writings, along with an outline of the nature of Shil's philosophical thinking on the basis of his recorded dialogues and interviews in Bengali with his former students Dhirendranath Datta and Rasbihari Das, with reference to his published works. The first section contains Shil's works in mathematics and science. This works in science and mathematics contains the second volume. Shil achieved recognition in the philosophy of mathematics with his research monogram titled A Memoir on the Coefficients of Number, being a chapter in the theory of numbers, almost 100 pages, published in 1891, where he attempted to give a solution to the problem of an intermediate equation. In his words, it consists of the determination of a number from the given value of its ratio to the sum of its divisors. In another monograph, the equation of digits, being an elementary application of a principle of numerical grouping to the solution of numerical equations, Shil claims that the fundamental operations of arithmetic are of the nature of equations. He showed with examples that problems of equations can be solved by method of equating corresponding digits from the end digit backward. It is to be mentioned that Shil believed in many value of logic, and he studied thoroughly the Sanjaya Belattiputra and Nagarjuna's logic and developed a kind of many-valued logic. He was not an absolutist, and he rejected this exclusive truth functional logic for explaining the reality of the world. And interestingly, nowadays, Graham Priest is trying to develop this paraconsistent logic out of this type of logic. So Shil is a precursor to this paraconsistent logic. We have not given much attention to aspect of Shil's genius, because this paraconsistent logic is very important nowadays to make programming especially in medical research and scientific research. Schill's magnum opus is the positive science of ancient Hindus, where he has used the word Hindu in a broad cultural sense to mean the main thought currents that contributed to building a civilization in Southeast Asia. You know, the word Hindu, actually the river Sindhu, it goes to the northern west part of Pakistan, and it may with this Arabian Sea, and the people who are living eastern side of this Sindhu river is known as by the word Hindu, because the Persians was not able to pronounce. There is no shaw but ho, so Sindhu becomes Hindu. Hindu does not mean any religion or followers of any religion. It is a cultural term. So she used in a cultural term in the positive science this word Hindu. His book was intended to serve as a preliminary to his studies in comparative philosophy. He claims that philosophy in its rise and development is necessarily governed by the body of positive knowledge preceding or accompanying it. Hindu philosophy on its empirical side was dominated by concepts derived from physiology and philology, just as Greek philosophy was similarly dominated by geometrical concepts and methods. Comparative philosophy, according to Schill, must take note of the empirical basis on which the speculative superstructure of Hindu thought was raised. Schill's claim is that the Hindu's inductive method or methods of algebraic analysis and scientific ideas have deeply influenced the course of natural philosophy in Asia, in the East as well as the West, in China, Japan, as well as in the Saracen Empire. Schill has discussed the novelty of the Nyaya method of verification of a hypothesis as well as its comparative excellence as compared to the method of John Stuart Mill. For Schill, the Indian way of inference is neither merely formal nor merely material, but a combined formal material deductive inductive process. The perusal of Schill's works is still illuminating, not only for the history of science, but also for new ways of philosophizing. At the first International Race Congress held in Rome in 1911, in his papers, Science of Anthropology, Schill argued that if modern civilization is distinguished from all other civilizations because of its scientific grounding, then it is also logically justified to argue that the problems we confront in this civilization must be addressed by the methodological techniques of science. The conquest of nature is claimed to be the first achievement of modern science. The same methodological techniques of science must also be applied to the organization of society. But for this, our understanding of science, instead of being confined to physical, chemical, and biological domains, must also be extended to the sociological and historical ones. He developed this thesis in another short monogram called Race Origins, Fundamental Considerations Touching of the Physical Basis of Race. Now I'm coming directly to the next section, the Schill in Religion and Philosophy. Schill's paper titled The Gita, a synthetic interpretation, only a few pages, is a masterpiece of interpretation of classical text of philosophy, and in his interpretation, Schill ignores commentators and commentaries. According to him, all of them have argued in their interpretations like defense lawyers who cannot come out of their preconceived dogma, Siddhanta, and have distorted the meaning of the conflicting passages to harmonize them with their dogma. I have never read any such illuminating article. Two articles throughout my life on Gita. One is by K.C. Bhattacharya, written in Bengali. Recently I edited, and it will be published soon. And this Schill's one, a philosopher's understanding, how a philosopher should understand these scriptures. especially Gita. Here we see, but if one studies Gita independently, he suggests that we should study the text independently without any bias, with an open-ended mind, that one becomes hopelessly puzzled at first by internal contradictions of a serious character, as well as by irrelevancies and meaningless repetitions. Here Sheil has revealed his insightful ideas about the historicity of humanity and society on the one hand and of knowledge on the other. This philosophic interpretation of the Gita goes at length to find new answers. Being a believer in the freedom of ideas, Sheil seems to admit that for a single question, particularly in philosophy, many answers are possible from alternative standpoints. There is an echo of what is said in the Rig Vedas, Anu Bhadra Krathavo Yantu Vishataha. Let noble thoughts come to us from different directions. Being a truth seeker, Sheil is always open to examination and ready to accept the result of critical inquiry. For him, distinguishing teaching of the Gita is a synthesis of more and more elements by successive stages, and that Gita represents a graduated synthesis of disciplines, sadhana. This interpretation of the Gita not only synthesizes its disparate contents, but it also synthesizes the claims of different schools of interpretations of the Gita. The researcher of the Gita cannot ignore the novelty and insight of Sheil's interpretation. In October 1899, Sheil attended the Oriental Conference held at Rome. His lectures were compiled in his book, Comparative Studies in Vaishnavism and Christianity. This is the short title, but the actual title was long. The actual title of the book is Comparative Studies in Vaishnavism and Christianity, with an examination of the Mahabharata legend about Narada's pilgrimage to Shatadvipa, and an introduction on the historical comparative method. In fact, there he first introduced what should be the ideal method of social sciences and philosophy of history. It was an experiment on the basis of the practical socio-ethical aspect of religion. In the context of today's communal and terror-oriented world scenario arising out of the misuse of religion, Sheil's book deserves special attention for protecting humanity from the danger of communalism, bigotry, and bloodbath. According to Sheil, true religion teaches love, not hatred. Religion emphasizing love creates a bridge among the followers of different religions instead of creating differences, discord, and untrust. We can see an application of interreligious dialogue in Sheil's book, where he has stressed the fundamental spirit and unity between Christianity and Vaishnavism, despite the outward differences. It is a systematic attempt at a comparative study in their mutual relations. General resemblances cannot be accepted as evidence of historical relationship. According to Sheil, the historical development of Indian cult of faith, Bhakti Marga, and the Vishnu worship is much prior to the so-called point of contact with Christianity. And this must be the starting point for any comparative study between Christianity and Vaishnavism. He argues for a comparative historical study of the different conceptions of God and the socio-ethical attitude of that particular religion in the broader context of different worldviews depicted in different cultures of the world. This book also throws light on the relation of humanity, human society, and the cosmos. For real, the role of religion in the formation of moral attitude originates in our speculations of the Godhead. In any comparative study, the points of difference and historicity must be considered seriously. Sheil has argued against the Indocentric thesis that Vaishnavism was influenced by Christianity and that the former borrowed many concepts from the latter. On the contrary, according to Shil, there is not a single element in Vaishnavism that was derived from Christianity. Shil has applied comparison and analogy with necessary stipulation to support his main contention that Christianity and Vaishnavism had independent origin and development, characterized by different lines of thought, and they must be acknowledged to be different manifestations in different race histories of the same religious idea or type, that they represent, with more or less of specific and racial differences, the same stadium in the development of the absolute idea or the history of the universal culture. Hill's book of poems, The Quest Eternal, was published in 1936. It contains ancient, medieval, and modern philosophical outlooks, and it reflects on the vision of evolution of human personality through the ages. She considers humanity itself as the modern hero and tries to see it in its simple form of universality. He visualizes the faith as humanity that lies in applying the synthetic vision to the pageant of universal history. The same philosophic idea dominates Shil's thinking in a two-part essay, namely Ram Mohan Rai, The Universal Man, one published in 1924, the other is 1933. He tries to locate the foundation of Ram Mohan's faith on the reconciliation of reason and scripture, and points to the transition from comparative religion to a holistic synthesis in universalism. Shil's versions of humanism is based on a scientific approach, and he maintained that this form of humanism would liberate humanity from the dominance of the world creeds and dogmas, to develop a synthetic and universalistic point of view. She believed that a cosmic humanism will be the future of humanity. Though she was a professed advocate of scientific thinking, yet, very importantly, he cautions us about the blindness of admitting science as depicting the whole of life. He pleads for other phases, the emotional, the socio-ethical, and the spiritual, and advocates that these other phases be given a proper foundation and structure in the organization of life. This new humanism would make us free from our blind obedience to scriptures. That is why, while delivering the presidential address as Vishwabharati's Foundation Day, 23rd December 1921 at Shantiniketan, Shil pleaded for a form of education in Rabindranath Tagore's University where students would be encouraged in free and open-ended thinking and in assimilation of ideas, both from the East and the West. There, each can realize himself only by helping others as a whole to realize themselves. Others can realize themselves by helping each individual to realize himself. Now, another important section is that on Swami Vivekananda and Ramakrishna, how Shil was related to them. There is an interesting, everybody takes interest there that Vivekananda was a friend of, and classmate of, was a friend of Shil and was a classmate of Shil. The first one is true. In my research, I found the second is an untrue, but people always write that Vivekananda was the classmate of Shil. During his college days as a General Assembly institution, now it is called Scottish Church College, from 1878 to 1884, Shil had a friendship with Narendranath Datta, later known as Swami Vivekananda, and Shitanath Nandi, a common friend of both. There is an unfounded belief that Narendranath Datta was Shil's classmate. But in fact, Narendranath was 1 year older than Shil in age, but in a class, he was reading in a class 1 year lower in the college than Shil. Sitanath Nandi introduced Narendranath to Shil with the conviction that none other than Shil could satisfy his academic thirst. This is an indirect recognition of Shil's scholarship among his contemporaries. Shil wrote of his first meeting with Ramakrishna as a thrilling experience of saintliness. However, Shil was not very happy when you see that his very bosom friend, Narendran Datta, subscribes to Ramakrishna's fault. According to Shil, Ramakrishna, who would experience religion in its totality as one whole experience, was a cosmic humanist in the field of religion. Shil does not believe that Ramakrishna has the vision of Kali. Kali speaks to Ramakrishna. He said Ramakrishna thought that Kali speaks to him. Sri Ramakrishna practiced religion with the spirit of religious pluralism. This kind of religion, in a broad sense, is different from religion in the concrete. It can free humanity from its limitations of outlook by finding man in the universe and the universe in man. That is why Ramakrishna sadhana and spiritual discipline, according to Shil, consists of a syncretic practice of religion by being Hindu with the Hindus, a Muslim with the Muslims, and a Christian with the Christians, and the universalist with the universalists. Now, from what I have said, I'm trying to present a glimpse of Shil's philosophical ideas out of all this. As mentioned earlier, Shil's manuscripts where he had reportedly noted his own philosophical ideas are lost. Now, from the recorded conversations and interviews taken by two of his former students, Dhirendra Mohan Datta and Rashbari Das, along with the major works mentioned earlier, we have a glimpse of Shil's philosophy. The interviews and informal recorded conversations are compiled in the Bengali works of Shil. This compilation also contains a small essay with the title Darshaner Upadan, Elements of Philosophy. For Shil, philosophy is an outcome of man's explorations at the meta level, meaning his experience as an engagement in the quest of the nature of time, space, etc., to picture the world in a meaningful way. In contemporary society, the same experience might be grasped by different people in different ways and interpreted in various ways using multiple means. Accordingly, different interpretations are provided about the relation of the individual to the world. Different answers to the questions of birth, death, and evolution, sustenance and destruction of the world. To address this, there may be different theses that result in different ways of philosophizing. Therefore, for Shil, philosophy in a basic sense means metaphysics, by which he means both spatial metaphysics, dealing with the problems of God, self, etc., that transcend the ontology of experience, and general metaphysics that is immanent in the ontology of experience. Philosophy, in the broader sense, is critical examination, a method of the inquiry of truth. Whatever human beings know in and through the body-mind complex becomes the subject of critical examination. And through this philosophy, they determine the meaning of all experiences of life, both the external world and the internal world of mind. Its states are designated by a single word, this, idam in Sanskrit. But the self is designated by the word I, aham in Sanskrit. For self, for Shil, all our cognitions are gained on the basis of these two. However, the origin of these two fundamental categories needs to be interrogated philosophically. An attempt to address this from the alternative standpoints would raise metaphysical issues. Schill often refers to ancient Indian thought as Hindu thought, in which the most distinguishing feature of Hindu philosophy is that it is not only starts from experience as a homogeneous whole, but always in investigating the manifold in the real world returns to the actual synthetic unity in the Atma. For Schill, philosophy is akin to worship of free thinking and openness, which are crucially important for the development of human science, philosophy, and culture. The vitality of culture demands reappraisal and assimilation with a synthetic attitude. Schill's philosophic thought seems to be rooted in Advaita Vedanta. Some interpreters claim that Schill was a Hegelian in his philosophy. Though he had fondness for Hegel, he criticized Hegel as being too deterministic. Hegel could not notice that there were rich elements in Hindu, Chinese, and Islamic cultures for philosophical development. Hegel believed in the supremacy of Western European culture. For Schill, the Eurocentric view alone cannot establish the real picture of the philosophy of history. Schill questions Hegel's attempt to deduce different human experiences from absolute thought. Schill's philosophical thought was rooted in classical Indian philosophy and science. He was a rationalist, a humanist. He initiated comparative philosophy in India's academic world. Schill influenced the Bengal Renaissance in many ways. So this is all that I wanted to present before you. Thank you so much for bearing with me this time, a long time. Professor Ponira Silvam, I'm seeing Professor Ponira Silvam.
Is there? Are we going to have some discussion?
Yes.
Organizers, Bimal.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can we have some discussions as Professor Ponira Silvam is asking from Madras?
Obviously, sir. Obviously.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I am Panir Selvam from Chennai. I was the head of the Department of Philosophy, Madras University. Now, actually, we are very grateful to Dilip Kumar Mohanta ji for first of all, I am grateful to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, who was kind enough to organize this meeting and who is also present in this meeting. First of all, we are thankful to Professor Mohanta ji for a very wonderful presentation. In fact, I must tell many of our colleagues who are attending this meeting that B.N. Schill is one of the neglected philosophers of contemporary Indian philosophy. In fact, we have been talking about contemporary Indian philosophy in detail. We have been quoting number of philosophers. But unfortunately, B.N. Schill, who has contributed, who made a synthesis between East and West, and also religion, comparative religion, where he has, Professor Mohantaji has mentioned Vaishnavism and Christianity. And also Schill was one of a senior most professor who could link philosophy with that of science. A neglected philosopher has been taken for discussion, and we are very grateful to Professor Mohantaji. And another thing in this context, I would like to say that the Indian Philosophical Congress, which was established 95 years ago by Rabindranath Tagore and Radhakrishnan, in which presently I and Mohanta are part of the organization. We are office bearers of this, wherein we have put Organzied's essay competition for students. So every year we organize this essay competition for students, and many students are sending their papers for evaluation, and Mohantaji is evaluating these papers for quite some time, and we select the best candidate and we award them some cash award. So in this way, the IPC, wherein I and Mohantaji are part and parcel, are doing something for the great contribution made by Organzied. That is one thing. And let me say a few words about some comments I would like to say. Comments or observation with regard to the excellent lecture presented by Mohantaji. Now, initially, he has very beautifully pointed out how in Organzied's philosophical understanding, we can see three important aspects. The first aspect, which he has mentioned, is about how the academician should be dealt with, or how the academics is free from politics. And secondly, he has shown a very important item, I would say. It is how logic plays a dominant role in philosophical discourse. This is a very important point. And thirdly, he has pointed out how Professor Organzied's understanding there is a celebration of humanism. This is something very important, and these three aspects have been highlighted very beautifully. And secondly, Professor Mohantaji, in fact, it is a revelation for me, Mohantaji, because though we heard of Organzied, we have never dealt in depth, I would say. And you have dealt it in a very beautiful way. I am grateful to you because I learned a lot from you. And one important observation which I would like to mention in this regard is you have pointed out how the closed system of truth cannot convey the philosophical understanding. This is something really remarkable. Because we, especially in contemporary Indian philosophical discourse, we limit ourselves by saying that I am a Buddhist, I am a Vaishnavite, I am a Advaitin, I am a Shaiva. This closed compartmentalization of philosophy cannot convey the truth, full truth. And you have pointed out very nicely, and this is a remarkable aspect which you have elaborated very nicely. And another thing which I was very much surprised to listen to you, that how Professor Organzied was developing a many-valued logic. And you yourself has pointed out how the logic has this two-valued logic, and how in his approach he could transcend the many-valued logic, which is quite often used in many programs. So this is another important, significant aspect which we have to take into account, and this is the need of the hour, because we often celebrate the Western tradition, and it is high time for us to tell the Westerners that here is one thinker who could also talk about many-valued logic long back. And secondly, the comparative philosophy. This is a very, very fascinating point, because you have pointed out that how comparative philosophy can help us. In fact, I would say, in fact, I am making some approaches in my discourses, wherein this comparative approach can give us a proper understanding of philosophy. And you have pointed out how he was very much influenced by Hegel, and how he has also critiqued Hegel. This is something really remarkable. But one question which perhaps, this is not a question, perhaps, this is one observation, or I seek clarification from you, because you are authority on Organzied, that interpretation. While talking about Bhagavad Gita, you have pointed out that Organzied was against this type of interpretation which we often offer to a text. But normally, when we are talking about hermeneutics, which is very much popular now, we always depend on hermeneutics. What we are trying to say is that there cannot be one interpretation or one understanding of the text. Tilak interpretation of Bhagavad Gita is different from that of Gandhi and from others. So there is plurality of interpretation, and this plurality of interpretation actually adds strength to the text. So how would BN Seal or you would approach this sort of understanding? Would you try to say that interpretation is not at all needed? And I, as a hermeneutician, would always support this interpretation, because interpretation will always give different multiple dimension which is immersed in the text, which sometimes is not seen by the author. Of course, this is my humble view. I may be wrong. You may kindly throw some light on it.
No, sir. Very. Thank you so much, Professor Punita Silpan, for commenting it so beautifully and raising the very pertinent issue. You see, both B.N. Sheel and K.C. Bhattacharya, they were against any closed understanding of the text. So when we read any such scriptures, we should not be guided by the traditional commentators first. First, the text is open. Text is open. If it is closed, then there cannot be progress in your understanding as well as in thinking. And unless you have any progress in your thinking, in your understanding, you cannot provide any platform for future generation in action. Every action is preceded by a solid theory, The theory and praxis are always going side by side. So if you are guided by any of the commentaries first or commentators, it means you are obstructing your free thinking. Every research in science, what happens? The subsequent researches cancels the previous one sometimes. It does not mean they are devaluing the speeches. The scientific research develops just like, one after another. It's not like horizontal. It's just one after another. Even the previous wrong step is very important for knowledge of human civilization. That is why as I quoted even Rig Veda, that nothing is finalized. Nothing is, anu bhadra kratava yantu vishwataha. We should be open-ended. There should not be closed-door thinking. And philosophy is a very dynamic subject. For today, we are having this virtual seminar. This is because of the development of technology. And philosophy of technology says, if you do not accept it today, tomorrow you will have to pay for this without getting the benefit of this. So always there is dynamism. There is no close understanding, fixed and final. Rather, understanding or knowing is flexible. It is very flexible. It is very fuzzy. And your success lies in how much nearer to certainty you can go with your fuzzy assumptions and fuzzy calculations. Probability, you would say the probability is our master, not certainty. The claim of certainty leads to dogmatism. I can reach nearest to certainty, but I cannot claim that I have reached certainty and this is the final. Otherwise, human civilization would have stopped. And this is actually the spirit. And you refer to this menu-valued logic. He said there must maximum, he evaluated 8 type of values, and there may be many more, because this future is not fully programmed. And that is, he developed this number theories. It is a meta-analysis of numbers. As Einstein remarked, that we are very grateful to Indian, because Indians gave the logical basis of all the scientific investigations, inventing the theory of number. This is what Einstein said. And Sheel, as you see, in Russell also said, logic is the essence of philosophy. Correct. So any kind of dogmatism. And in humanism, he was influenced by this Vaishnava tradition and also by, as I said, the Bodhisattva ideals, Sarva Mukti. So logic is very important, and comparative thinking is also important. Even in Calcutta University, our syllabus is different from other universities. 50% Indian, 50% Western. Always a comparative study is there, because you cannot close your eyes to what is real.
Yeah.
So this pan-Indianism, blind Indianism, he would not admit. He was an universalist, humanist, let's say. Anyway, your comment is very interesting comment.
Thank you, Professor. We really enjoyed. I learned a lot.
Now I have last 14 years I worked on this, but I don't get any publishers in India. There are so many universities. My friends are vice chancellor, many. Once Asiatic Society requested me, I want to hand over these manuscripts. Even all the papers on this mathematics I have edited. And the first part, this Vaishnavism and Christianity, this book, this is in the constitute the first part is ready. If anybody is willing, I can hand over the manuscript. It is ready for publication. But unfortunately, once Asiatic Society they have shown interest, I submitted the first volume. They are yet to give me a response.
Oh.
So, sorry state of academic affairs in our country.
That is true.
Anyway,
That's true.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you. Nice speech delivered, Professor by Professor Mohan, sir. And thank you, Professor Servan, sir. And it has been a long time since our VC sir has joined us. So before entering into current discussion, we will hear about valuable some speech about the webinar. I am profusely overjoyed to take the opportunity to introduce our chief patron of the webinar, Professor Sadhan Chakraborty, our Vice Chancellor at University, and he is also an eminent scholar of philosophy, and also his work is famous for psychology and logic also, and Indian philosophy. So now I would like to request our VC sir to deliver some valuable speech about the webinar. Over to you, sir, please.
Thank you, Mr. Banerjee, for inviting me to deliver my speech. But here, my friends, Professor Ponit Silvam and Professor Mohanto, they all know that I don't like to speak much. I am a listener and serious listener. I was really enjoying the philosophical dialogue between these two scholars in the field of philosophy. I was really enjoying. After a long time, I had this opportunity because these days I'm more preoccupied with all administrative activities, which I don't like much. But this is my responsibility now, one of my responsibilities. But I am really very happy to know myself that my old acumen is not lost. I was really enjoying your dialogue. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I extend my regards and gratitude to both of you, Professor Pani Silvam and Professor Mohanto, for being present here, and actively you are participating in this webinar, which is making it a great success. I'm really grateful to all of you. And Raniganj Girls College, the Department of Philosophy, they organize this kind of program in philosophy every year. So I also thank them for doing this religiously. Today I don't want to talk much. I only want to share something with you because this is also a rare opportunity to, these days, this is a rare opportunity to share views with thinkers of this kind of stature. One thing which I want to share is that philosophy is getting more and more importance. Philosophy always has its own importance, but it is, if we want to see it realistically, then we can say that it has its own importance. Another thing which is also important is whether we are giving importance to it. It is important, really, but whether we are giving importance to it, this is also a thing which is to be noted. These days, much importance is being given to philosophy because we are all speaking of sustainable development. All over the world, this is a global emphasis, sustainable development. Another thing which is being talked about much is interdisciplinarity. And in both of these two areas, philosophy has a lot to contribute. And all over the world, thinkers are looking for people who can contribute to these two fields significantly. And the philosophers who are actively engaged in philosophical thinking, they are really in a position to contribute to these areas significantly. And for that, we, the students of philosophy and the teachers of philosophy who are associated with different academic institutions, universities, colleges, even schools, if we can participate in this endeavor, if we can participate in dialogues with teachers and students of other departments, scholars, also to be included here, research scholars. So if we can initiate and continue a dialogue between teachers and students and scholars of different fields, then I think philosophy can be rejuvenated all over the world, not only in our country. For example, the stream of law, the stream of management, the stream of engineering, technology, the stream of science. In the West, it is always there. In India also now, we are, the thinkers who are those policymakers and others, they are asking for promoting this kind of thing. If we can relate philosophy to law, to management, to engineering, to technology, then together, through this concerted effort, we can make sure of sustainable development to a great extent. See, legal professionals are really very important. Managers from management, they are really very important. Scientists, they are also very, very important in our society. They have their own specializations, they have deep knowledge in their own fields, but specialization alone will not do. If those specializations are combined, then only we can have a meaningful growth in our society, and philosophers can contribute in this area to a great extent. So I will request all of you to come forward and to initiate and continue meaningfully as much dialogue as possible in our academia. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, your Honorable VC, sir. Your speech enriched like me, who have a connection with philosophy, but the discussion which you and Dr. Mahanto sir and Furnish Silverum said that which enrich us. Thank you, sir, again.
Thank you, sir, Honorable VC, for your remarkable speech, and it's truly helped us in future and inspired us, and your valuable speech for next generation, and also we are very helpful to us. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Now, before entering current discussion, I like to draw a kind attention to all the participants. Please, you are feel free to put your question in YouTube live chat box. And some question has already come in chat box for Professor Mohanto sir. Anuprita Chatterjee asked one question: how did Steele define cosmic humanism?
Please repeat the question.
How did Steele define cosmic humanism? Over to you, sir.
Cosmic humanity, cosmic humanity. Yes, this is very interesting because, as I said, he believed in Advaita Vedanta, and everywhere consciousness, we are part of the universal consciousness. So humanity, the root of humanity is the cosmic. That is, he believed this universalism. So there is no part, individually I cannot do anything. All my doing is interconnected with other. I'm interdependent with other. So whatever I do as interconnectedly. Say for example, if we divide broadly different spheres of existence, say for example, human, animal, and plant, but none of the spheres can independently exist, because if there is imbalance in the plant world, as we see today, the environmental crisis, it is due to our wrongdoing. So there should be a balance for existence. So human existence will be extinguished if we ignore this balance. That is why he said that humanity is cosmic humanism, Vishwa Manovatavad. Any other question?
No, sir.
Anyway.
Actually, I have one question, sir.
Yes, please.
So, Vijendranath Seal, if in future, in contemporary Indian philosophy thinkers join that type of syllabus and in UG level or PG level, so I think it will be very better for us, because in previous time we did not know the Acharya Seal. Today we heard about the topic, and so I'm search some Google. So that time I only understand, it was a very famous philosopher. And if you did not share there, so I think some little bit student, we did not know about the thing. So I think, sir, uh, Professor Acharya Sil, uh, what he say about morality or ethics in human life?
See, there is no specific article I could not discover that he delved on morality or spirit, but he dealt with spirituality. Spirituality and morality are interconnected. Say, for example, you are to go to Chennai or Delhi from Calcutta airport. So, the airport is, airport is a necessary condition uh, to reach Delhi. But if this is morality, and but you cannot stop there, and that is spirituality. And these are the things discussed in this comparative study of Vaishnavism and Christianity. So this morality and spirituality are interconnected. As I said, he was a believer in many valued logic. He was a believer in possible world. We have two worlds, necessary world and possible world. Whatever is necessary must be possible, and whatever is possible may not be necessary. Here lies when whatever is possible, some people out of dogmatism, they put it as necessary. He does not believe there. And you are right, in contemporary or modern Indian philosophy, there is nothing like B and Shil. As I said, that the reading materials are not available. Unfortunately, we have not preserved it, but everybody knows that he started the comparative philosophy. Even the syllabus of philosophy, it is available now on almost 50 pages. In those days, he prepared a syllabus of Indian philosophy. It is our fault. It is our fault. As I said, I prepared last 14 years, I worked on this, but I am not getting a good publisher. If it is once it is published, when reading materials are available, you can include. But the positive science of ancient Indian Hindus, it is available in the market. At least some portion of these philosophy students, science students must read. Philosophy is against all kind of dogmatism, and that is started with Shil in modern times. So it is not Shil's fault. We will have to include those who are preparing the syllabus. They must start with this. Garfield, he wrote a book with another author. He came to meet me in Calcutta University, and he excluded Shil. Then it is incomplete. Your proposal itself is incomplete. So it's a nice, at least that was in my mind, at least people should know his name, his contribution, whatever is possible. And people in the Western countries, people read this positive science, thoroughly. Not only the philosophy people, also the science people. The scientists are reading. They are very fond of ancient Indian science. It was prepared first as an introduction to Acharya Prafulla Chandra Ray's Hindu chemistry. So in that way, I'm thankful to you because you have started at least thinking. You have given us a scope at least where I could share some of my ideas, which are comparatively not known to people. Yeah. So I think slowly then people will start thinking, and when the reading materials are available, I hope some universities will take initiative to at least one section to be and Shil. At least the philosophical method, what should it be? In the very first, you read Sankhya philosophy, but you see the very good treatment of Sankhya there from scientific point of view. And this is methodology of science. As I said, inductive deductive combination. He said these are some of the portions anybody can include in any course. That would be helpful. Thank you for this. A very good suggestion also. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for your remarkable speech, and it's truly help us in future. Thank you, sir. So again, I want to convey my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for taking time out and bring here today. And today now they are joined Professor Tiwari and Professor Gobind Saran sir. They join us. They have joined us. So thank you. Welcome, sir. And now we get started. Let me throw some light of today's webinar, 2-day international webinar, and on exploring some aspects of contemporary philosophy, and sponsored by Indian Council of Philosophical Research, New Delhi, and organized by Department of Philosophy, Raniganj Girls College. Thank you again. Now, I would like to request to deliver today's speech Professor Devendranath Tiwari, Professor, Department of Philosophy and Religion, Banaras Hindu University, and he is a renowned author and also a eminent philosopher, and his work is very famous in Indian philosophy, religion, and contemporary philosophy and analytic philosophy. And we are very appreciate to join us, and it's a glorious moment to extend my warm wishes to you. So, Professor Tiwari, I would like to request join us and deliver your speech. Over to Professor Tiwari, sir. Please, sir. Welcome, sir. Unmute your phone. Unmute. Yes, yes.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Sadhan Chakravarti ji, respected Professor Dilip Mahant ji, Professor Panir Selvam ji, the convener of the seminar, Bimal Banerjee, and I'm happy that you have invited me to share my views. Share my views with the scholars of repute here, though I am not a. I'm audible.
Yeah.
I am audible.
Very much.
But I have been privileged to listen, Professor. Significant discussion. Why there is disturbance?
Please unmic Professor Ponira Silvam. Please unmic your phone.
So far, I have gone through the contemporary philosophers. I thought what prompted to express their views in a particular way. And I found 4 factors. The first factor is that there were challenges made by the European Germans. You know, and they opined that Asian, including Indians and Africans, mind is not so developed to do philosophy. So the contemporary Western philosophers took up it and proved that they are wonderful way of life and views to develop and to make the West even known to it. You know, all the Renaissance movement that also helped much to give a rise to the contemporary Western philosophy. And the second point is as Professor Mahant pointed out, you know, humanism was started in the West. But in India, the invaders' aggression was continuing. And against this aggression and extensionism, after Renaissance, there was a need to cultivate the human society about the values, and especially these values are not materialistic humanism or realistic humanism, but so type of humanism. For example, you can find aesthetic humanism in Tagore. I'm not so much sure of it. You are the expert. Spiritualistic humanism of Aurobindo, and likewise the humanism of Gandhi, Aurobindo, and so on. So the message they wanted to convey by their thoughts is that philosophy are for the welfare of only few, but it can help promote the life and thought of all belonging to this globe. So the second factor was the value-oriented thinking of the contemporary philosophy. And you know, the third point is belonging to that. The third point is that before that, you know, classical metaphysics, we are doing a lot. And we were knowing that only heterodox and orthodox systems are there. And if we know any of them or all of them, we are the Vidwan, we are the scholars. But it was based that the whole social and moral ideas are grounded on metaphysics. But the contemporary philosophers, to me, as we find in Vivekananda, Tagore, and all others contributions, that already existing metaphysics has been given a social and ethical background by the contemporary philosophers. So there was existing metaphysics, the Brahman, God, Jeev, and so many concepts which we are thinking that this is our whole philosophy. And social and ethical thinking comes out of that. But contemporary philosophers, Swami Dayanand, Saraswati, Vivekanand, and you see B.N. Seal and others, they tried to establish that we have a social philosophy, a moral philosophy, and a lot to add to the globe that is not based on metaphysics, but but rather the metaphysics is based on these philosophies. So we don't have need to be supported by a metaphysics. We have a social and ethical philosophy. So the fourth point factor that I noted is that though it was um, a freedom fighting against the British invaders, the British rulers, and all were fighting, some were fighting to free the territorial, uh, to free the country out of the British rule. But some contemporary philosophers, their view is that unless our thoughts are not free from so many captives, so many imprisonment of our thoughts, so many interests, our thoughts must be free. Unless it is not free, we cannot live freedom at mental level, at social level, and at moral level. So that was contemporary Indian movement was a moment of the freedom of thought as well, and all the contributions made by the contemporary philosophers kept in the center the idea of freedom of thought. So I'm so much impressed by this point, this factor, that they talk about the freedom of thoughts, not only from superstitions and social and moral captives, but from the metaphysical captiveness also. So this is very loving point that attacks me in the contemporary Indian philosophy. Now, we are reading the contemporary Western philosophy only through the books written by the history writers of contemporary Indian philosophy. And we are very often find that the books written, whether in English or in Hindi, they are repeating the same ideas in different shapes. So this is similar to the researches made by the universities' philosophy departments. They all do the social, moral aspects of philosophy of humanism, aspect of philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi, philosophy of Rabindranath Tagore, philosophy of Vivekanand, philosophy of Sri Aurobindo, and others. But we find only repetitions, nothing new is coming. But in spite of that, we are continuing to allow researches on these very repeated topics. The reason is that we do not go through the original text written by the contemporary philosophers, and we read the books written by the history of scholars, written by the scholars on history of contemporary philosophy. So, if you read two books on contemporary philosophy, you will not find a difference of the ideas. Nothing excels in any of the books. So everything is almost a stereotype writings. I don't know what purpose they serve, but they may be helpful to the students. But now the same thing is happening to the researches being conducted by the scholars in the philosophy departments. It seems that there is nothing apart from this very theme to work out in further researches. But what I found that not only metaphysics social and moral field, but Indian contemporary philosophers, they have contributed to aesthetics also. Tagore humanism is one of a model out of that. And many philosophers have concentrated on the aesthetic point of view also. And since last 50 years, so many philosophers working in the university is still alive. They have not been evaluated. Their thoughts have not been evaluated. And we are not giving importance to their thoughts. So many innovations are made in the philosophy, but we are not noticing. We are just overlooking. We are not assessing them. So it will not be, no lecture will be complete if we do not tell something about the aspects that is not covered by the writers on contemporary writers of the book on contemporary Indian philosophy. Nobody works on epistemological thinking in the contemporary Indian philosophy. Perhaps it is the view that there is no epistemology, there is no importance given to the epistemology by the contemporary Indian philosophers. So it is almost overlooked and overlooked by the researchers. Maybe that much less might have been written on the contemporary epistemology. But there must be a contemporary epistemology which we are not knowing. So this is a ignorance on our part, and we have to search it out. What innovations, what excellence has come up in the contemporary India on the issue of epistemological thinking. Not only that, but the philosophy of language. So this view in contemporary Indian philosophy is almost overlooked. Nobody thinks that there is any contemporary Indian philosophy. So, but much have been done on the field of, in the field of philosophy of language. And I make a difference between the linguistic philosophy and philosophy of language. Linguistic philosophy is almost occupied by the linguists. They do not concern with the idea of clarity of thoughts, of knowledge. They only try to clarify the uses of the language for the meanings. So meaning is primary there, but in Indian contemporary philosophy, language is also given primacy over the meaning. And moreover, the recent writings, they have proved that meaning is not what we perceive by the senses. Rather, meaning is that the language expresses. And in this field, I have also worked a lot, but I think that it has also not been known. I have failed to make it known to the audience. But it is a very interesting philosophy. And when we approach to the language and what language expresses in the mind, we try to understand the mind also as such. Mind, as we know, metaphysicians consider that mind is a faculty that can generate knowledge. But to me, mind is not a faculty that generates knowledge. It is not a generation faculty. And knowledge is not a product. Knowledge is not a generated entity. So, recent time, taking incentive from the Indian contemporary philosophy and the classical too, especially the grammarians Patanjali, Panini, and Bhartrihari. So many writings have come up, and they have concentrated, and they have opined, they have clearly pointed out that philosophy is concerned with what we know, and the mind is not a machine. Mind is a self-conscious being, and at the self-conscious stage, his mind is developed to the extent that it can flash. So it flashes only by language, and no knowledge is knowledge isolated from language. Rather, knowledge ceases to be so isolated from language. So language is the fleshing of the mind, and mind can only flesh. It cannot construct knowledge. And knowledge is not a constructed entity. Knowledge is a flesh that is unit as a whole. There is no part in the awareness. Awareness is artificially divided. So, considering the knowledge in the center, a philosophy has emerged that we can say that is not epistemology. Epistemology is confined to the sources of knowledge, what is the limit of our knowledge, and what is the validity of knowledge, and all these problems. So, but when we consider these issues of knowledge, so what is the nature of knowledge? What the mind can know? So we find that mind cannot know the things outside, because there is no room in the mind to house all of them. Mind can only flesh, and it is such that being self-conscious, mind can flesh, mind, and what flashes becomes the part of the memory, and even memory is also known when it flashes, and it always flashes in present. So you can know only the instant present, that is the flash of your mind, and any flash, any cognition, any thought, if you have any, that is determinate, that is infused by language. So suppose there are things, metaphysical things. Suppose I am saying this is mobile. So we know it mobile by shape, size, and material, and maybe a function it performs. But if we ask the question, what determines the knowledge of the mobile? So we find that the knowledge of the mobile is not determined by the quality of the mobile, or quality outside, quality of the mobile outside. Even the quality, the senses grasp, sense data, what we get data from the sensory organs, perception, they are only instrumental in manifesting the flesh, particular flesh, we know. But the flesh is, but the thing is known as object when it is flesh. So the object of our knowledge is not the outside, or the sense data, or the gestures, or anything else. Object of knowledge is confined only to the intelligible beings, the intelligible being of language and the meaning. So what we know, and as we practice in our day-to-day transaction, we use the words for the external things. So we can say that how can you ignore the external things? They are meaning. So I'm just trying to make you understand the word of your doing and the word of your knowing. So the word of doing is what is content, what is comprises of the things outside, having so many qualities, the substances and all that. But so far the word of your knowing is concerned, it is concerned only with the intelligible objects you know. And the intelligible objects are the objects that flash in your mind. And what flashes in mind is the idea, the thought, the concept. And I make a difference between the concept that flesh and the conceptualization of the concept that is conception. So there is difference between the concept and the conception. For example, you see, if I say man, all of us understand man, the meaning of the man. But if we philosophize it, suppose I am a Gandhian, I am a Urbanite, I am a Vivekanandian. So in their constitution of thought, I conceptualize, and I find that this is the conception of man in Aurobindo, conception of man in Gandhi, conception of man in Radhakrishnan, conception of man in Vivekanand, and conception of man in Tagore. We find the differences of their conceptions, but so far the concept is concerned, we all have the same understanding when we say the man. So this is also confused because we always have the infatuation with the outside things when we use language and we understand the knowledge in terms of the things. But this is not the way. The Indian thinking with the contemporary philosophers have emerged to the state that we the philosophers can know that what is the object of knowledge. Who is a philosopher? Not only Vivekanand, Tagore, B.N. Seal and others, they are philosophers. Anybody who confronts with a problem, with a popular theory, with a theorization, with a conceptualization, he may confront the problem. If you read the conception of man in Gandhi, Tagore and others, you confront with the problem with the conception of Vivekanand, Tagore or Gandhi. They are differing on that issues. And you can like someone, you can dislike someone. You can find fault with that. Wherever you find fault with that, that is the problem confronted to you with that conception of man. But there is no confrontation with your mind, with any problem with the concept, because it is all, the concept is all on which our communication is established. So everything you are imagining, thinking, that has to be found a shelter, only ground, only on the communication level. You cannot evade from, you cannot move long away, you cannot transcend this world of communication. So I think that contemporary philosophy now the scholars should take up also the epistemological approaches by the contemporary philosophers, their approach to the philosophy of language. And I think that a philosopher is not one who speculates only and write his speculations. Philosopher is one who confront with the problems in any theory or in any conceptualization of the concept. And he reflects over that. And when the problem is cleared, he feels pleasure, bliss. So philosophy becomes a discipline for providing bliss, ananda, only when you confront with the problem, you analyze the problem, you reflect over the problem, and you resolve that problem. So clarity is sought, and this clarity makes you happy. And it does not mean that when your problem is solved, philosophy stops and there will be no continuation of philosophy. Your mind can confront with other problem, with other theories, with other conceptualization. So your task is to get clarity out of the problems in any conceptualization of the thoughts, any concept of the thought, any theory of the thought, and thus you have the reason, proper reason to say that philosophy is not like water for fish, because the fish can survive for a few minutes without water, but it cannot survive without the gill. So our thoughts are isolated from language. There is no thought. So your philosopher's concern is what is expressed in language. You may be a very good scholar, no problem. But I am not concerned with that. I am concerned with analyzing, thinking, making it clear only what you say, what you express. So your expressions can be clear to me or can cause some problem. I can think over that. I can counter that. I can analyze that. And I can ask questions also for clarity and concept. So the researches should be made in the field of aesthetics. Professor Selvam asked about the issue of hermeneutics. Okay, it was a very good issue, but it was having, this movement was having a fixed program to interpret the text in its cultural milieu, in its social, geographical atmosphere. So everybody is not entitled to interpret Bible or likewise, because the thoughts of the Bible came 2000 years back, and you are going to interpret this. So all the sociology, geography, and the anthropology and other things, you are unaware, and without being aware of all those conditions, you cannot be a good interpreter. You are not entitled to be, you are not righteous to interpret the text. And even if you claim that you know all the geography, sociology, and economics, and history of thoughts of the time the text came, do you think that your interpretation of the text, interpretation of the statements be correct, authentic? Just I want to tell you a little story to make my point clear about the hermeneutics. A child was playing in a yard, graveyard. He was a 2-3 years old child. He sought permission from the parents to go to the graveyard nearby, and he was playing. So after long, the child did not return. So parents become anxious and they started searching. So they asked some of the co-players, the children, where about the child? They say that, oh, 2 men came and they took away. I don't know. I know this much only, that 2 persons come and they took the child away. Then he asked to the Chaukidar, to the gateman of the graveyard. The Chaukidar, gatekeeper, told that, yes, they come to the gate. The child came to the gate with 2 men. Oh, after that he became invisible. I cannot say, but he became invisible. Lastly, the parents approached to the priest living nearby. He was knowing everything about the history, geography of the graveyard and the future. So they asked the same problem, and the priest interpreted that those God loves joins God. The parents started weeping, and after that they went to the house, and being tired, they wanted to get rest. So in the corner of the room, there were so many bundles of clothes. So they tried to bring a seat for their sleeping. And they saw that the child is sleeping there. So when was the child lost? The child was sleeping there. Whose interpretation is true? Whether it is the interpretation of the co-players, whether it is the interpretation of the chowkidar, gate man, or whether the interpretation of the priest, whose interpretation is, they are not touching the reality. The reality is that the child was not lost, he was sleeping. So Harmonists cannot claim about the certainty of the interpretation of the text. This problem arises only that when we consider that the text is transcendental to us, to our language, to our approach. We never think that text also flashes in my mind, and we think that, oh, text is translation, it is from the big mind. He was the visualizer of the reality. So I am not the visualizer, so I cannot grasp the text what says. But if anything is transcendental from your language, that cannot be grasped by even the great minds. Great minds also grasp it only how it is grasped by their mind. But this is what going on throughout the world even today. So now the time has come to realize that we have to be philosophers in the sense that we have to concentrate on our knowledge, how it places, and if there is some problem, we have to analyze it, we have to deliberate it, we have to make it clear, agreeable, and lastly, the problem is resolved. So, my submission is that the scholars should try to do research to find out, to write also about the development of epistemological thinking and the thinking on philosophy of language in contemporary India, and to assess the philosophical contribution of the philosophers. 2-3 philosophers are also here. What contribution they have made, so as to make the coming generation feel pride of our contemporary achievement. With these words, I thank you all for listening me. Thank you. Thank you. Bimal, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Tiwari, sir. Thank you so much for your remarkable speech, and it's truly help us in future. And your valuable speech is very nice and very informative for us. And there are lots of questions arise from YouTube chat box. Some questions are arise. Some participants, can we start the question and answering session? Can I proceed, sir?
Yes.
One question arise from one scholar: why study philosophy in modern? Why study philosophy in modern world? One question.
Why?
Why study philosophy in modern world?
Yeah.
In modern world, yeah, they want to write, I think. Why?
Okay. Let me respond to this. Let me
Okay.
respond to it. See, very good question, and people are also saying like that philosophy is dead, and why should we read philosophy in modern time? But is there any excuse? If you are a you are having you are a rational being, you are always claiming that you are a rational being, but how you are a rational being if you are not having a rational hunger? Rational hunger means if you are not confronting with any problem in any concept or theory or conceptualization. So, without confronting with any problem and thinking over it, you are claiming that you are rational. If you are rational, you have to feel a rational hunger. You have two hungers only: the digestive hunger, stomach, stomach hunger, and the sexual hunger. But the third is you are a rational being. You should have a rational hunger. And the problems that your mind confront is the rational hunger. Think over that, clarify it. So philosophy is always alive. It is in your day-to-day use. So philosophy never dies, and there is no excuse. Even if you are doing science, technology, there is philosophy of science, there is philosophy of medical science, technology. Some people say that there is meta philosophy, but there is no meta like meta philosophy or philosophy of the philosophies, because even the philosophy of the philosophy is also a philosophy. So there is no excuse from philosophy, and there is no question. This question is not rational to the rational mind. So if you are not thinking about thinking, you are not a thinking being. If you are not a rational being, you can ask the question like that philosophy has lost its relevance and there is no need to do philosophy. But if you have a rational hunger, you will always feel a need of philosophy. Is it clear?
Yes,
Is
sir.
it clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. So, and another question arise in our chat box. What is the significance of the title philosophy today? What is
Philosophy
the significance
today.
of the title? Yeah.
Relevance of the topic today, philosophy today.
Yes, sir.
So you see, I am not a politician. Who can do with the ideas vocal for local or make in India and like that. Okay, na? I do not know. I do not deny that. That is also approach, but that is approach of a social political thinker. We are philosophers. Philosophical thinking is our occupation. We occupy with that. So contemporary, I have not confined only to what the history books on contemporary philosophy has included and what is in your courses. And up to date, what philosophers, like you see, Dilip Kumar Mahan, Panir Selvam, and so many, Dayakrishna and other philosophers, B.N. Seal, and so what, how far they have approached to the philosophical thinking, and more than that, what is the future of philosophy? Covering this, I have used the philosophy today. Clear? Is it clear? Hello? Is it clear?
And,
Any question?
one question another, how can we recover the role of philosophy in modern science? How can we recover
Modern science.
Modern science?
Science. So you see, philosophy cannot be science, but there can be a philosophy of science. Okay, na? Philosophy cannot be science. Philosophy cannot be sociology, cannot be history, but there can be the philosophy of history and philosophy of science. So this way you can.
Okay, sir. Now here some professor here, Professor Mohanto sir and Panir Silva sir, if you ask some question or some discussion, both of you can.
Professor Mohandaji, would you like to say something?
Yes, sir. But please, Panira Silvamji, please start the discussion.
Okay. Now, the second lecture is also very thought-provoking, like that of Professor Mohantaji's. But the issue that Tiwari ji, nice to see you after a long time.
Thank you, sir. Namaste.
Namaste, namaste. It is very interesting to listen to you, Tiwari ji, especially on some of the issues pertaining to the contemporary Indian philosophy. Now, very beautifully, you have pointed out the 4 important factors which are really good, I would say. The first one, which very elaborately discussed, was with regard to the challenges of the European thinkers. In fact, this is one of the important issues in the context of contemporary Indian philosophy, no doubt, because there has been a criticism by the West that Indian philosophy, especially the Asian philosophy, is not productive and all that one. Very important factor, I would say, which you emphasized. And secondly, the humanistic values, that is how human values are approached by the contemporary Indian philosophy. But the third one is very fascinating, and I am very much impressed by the way in which you have elaborated. That is how the metaphysics, of course, in the classical Indian philosophy also, we have been talking about metaphysics. But in contemporary Indian philosophy, as you very correctly point out, there is a shift. What is that? Now, the metaphysical concepts are now being supported by social philosophy as well as moral and political philosophy. This, I think, is a very remarkable point, because in the classical philosophy also we have been talking about morality, religion and all. But what is significant is that the same metaphysics has now has been redefined by using religion and the political philosophy, moral philosophy. And the best example is Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda called the poor as Daridra Narayana. So there also he talked about metaphysics, but the metaphysics has now attained a new coinage, I would say. And you have very beautifully pointed out that one, and salutation to you, because this is very important. And the fourth one is also a very significant point which you have made, that is with regard to the freedom of thought. In fact, here I have been fascinated by the Swaraj in Ideas by K.C. Bhattacharya, wherein he talked about that there is no problem in listening to the West, but we cannot forget our own tradition. And in fact, this is a view of Sri Aurobindo as well as Radhakrishnan and others. So this is also another significant point which you made. I'm grateful to you. And you have raised one important issue, whether there is any new contribution made by the contemporary Indian philosophy, because sometimes it is said, you have also pointed out,
philosophers are out.
yeah, nothing new is coming. This, I think, is a little problem in the context of contemporary Indian philosophy. And there are many philosophers who have pointed out, many sages have pointed out. I here remember Swami Ahayananda Bharati. I think you are aware of his contribution. He says, after independence, the contemporary Indian philosophers have not contributed substantially. And in fact, he said that contemporary Indian philosophy is not, they have not made any significant contribution. What they do is simply repeating what has been stated in the classical Indian philosophy. Of course, this statement can be challenged, no doubt. But if you look at the contribution made by some of our contemporary thinkers, now, for example, I would like to quote Subhajibin Bhattacharya, who made an attempt to understand Navya Nyaya, for example, through the eyes of mathematical logic. And Ganeshwar Mishra, you have pointed out how philosophy language in the contemporary philosophical scene could be seen. And Ganeshwar Mishra is one beautiful example. He could see Shankara as a linguistic philosopher or a philosopher of language. Of course, you said that they are two different. I also agree with that. So Ganeshwar Mishra could successfully show that Shankara is a philosopher of language, because we have been talking about the metaphysics of Shankara, but here is a new way of understanding Shankara from the perspective of philosophy of language. And also there are many contemporary epistemologies. You made a reference to contemporary epistemology, and all these are neglected areas. So your approach to contemporary Indian philosophy or philosophy today is something very important, and this issue has to be taken seriously. In fact, in one of my articles, I have pointed out there are thinkers who believe that there is no progress in Indian philosophy after the 10th century. And they say that the philosophy in India has ended with Madhva. But it is not so. We are trying to reinterpret Indian philosophical tradition in the contemporary scene by giving new terminologies or new way of understanding. So in contemporary Indian philosophy, there is some new ideas that are emerging, which is different from that of a classical Indian philosophy. Here, I'll take just one more minute and then stop. Because I'm keen on listening to Professor Mohanta and the reply which Professor Tiwari would be interested to give. Now, one thing is contemporary Indian philosophy, there is a dramatic change in the approach of philosopher in the contemporary Indian philosophical scene. For example, there are, as you know, the important movements like philosophical movements like existentialism, phenomenology, hermeneutics, all these are seen from the contemporary Indian philosopher's perspective. Now, for example, Professor Balasubramaniam has made an attempt to understand phenomenology from Advaitic standpoint. So this is possible, provided the Indian philosophers, I mean, especially contemporary Indian philosopher, or I would use the phrase recent Indian philosophers, they are ready to adapt themselves to the changes that are taking place in the West. But it's also necessary that contemporary Indian philosophers should approach the modern problems. Otherwise, as somebody has asked the question, that what is the need of philosophy today? If philosophy is not relevant today, then tell me what is the subject that is relevant. And I think that it is a need of the hour that philosophers, or contemporary Indian philosophers, should talk about the concept of freedom, the concept of human dignity, the concept of women's liberation. These are some of the aspects which the contemporary Indian philosophers should address themselves. Otherwise, or environmental issues, etc. Otherwise, there will be a criticism that there is nothing really contributory to the contemporary Indian philosophy. I think that there is a need for revisiting contemporary Indian philosophy, and we have to make it relevant. And as Professor J. N. Mohanty very rightly said, if there are some, and Professor Dayakrishna also, if there are some issues which are not relevant at present, don't hesitate to throw these issues out. Don't keep it as, because when Mohanty says that there are certain issues which are anti-Korean interest, don't keep them as because they have been said by past. And here, it is not the case that we are rejecting the past. We have to respect the past. But if something is not relevant, if not acceptable, then we must be bold enough to reject that. Then I'll take just half a minute, because I have to say something with regard to the interpretation, hermeneutic. Now, Professor, what I would like to say is, now with regard to hermeneutics, of course, you said I can't go back to that historicity, culture, all that is fine. In fact, in hermeneutics, we say that don't go back to that historicity, because it is not possible. I cannot go back to the period of Shankara or Ramanuja. But what I need is the text. Only the text is taken from the author and keep it in my present historicity, present culture and tradition, and then I can interpret it so that some new meaning will emerge from the text. This is what we expect from the text, because the text contains in it, but the author, when he writes, he has got certain limitation, but the interpreter has a full liberation, which means he can see the text from the modern context. So something new will emerge from the text always. And by doing that, I means the reader will understand his place in the text. It is not the case that somebody gives me the text and I have to read it. No, I have every right to know my role in the text. So the modern hermeneutics, I think, is approaching philosophical text in this way, so that some new meaning could emerge from the text, and that will, kindly note, that will enrich the text. What we should not do is violence to the text. We are not doing violence to the text. We are trying to interpret, reinterpret, and the text goes on. As Professor Monti sir has pointed out, that it is an open-ended one. We can't close the text by saying this is the meaning of the text. Even the author cannot say the meaning of the text. I have the liberty because I'm the reader. The text has to answer some of the questions which are. Thank you. Thank you.
Agree, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, but I agree with your last point, and very thankful to you for a very good remark. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Tiwari-ji. And nice to listen to you after a long time. Happy to see you. Professor Mohanta can perhaps.
Please unmute. Please unmute.
Yeah.
Now, Professor Tiwari, we can't hear you.
So, Professor Panir Selvam invited me 15 years back to his place, to his university. And after that, I am face to face with him now after 15 years. But I'm lucky that I used to meet you daily. I'm very happy, very happy.
Now the meeting is now open for sharing. Professor Mohanty sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. You can.
I thank Professor Tiwari and Professor Panir Selvam profusely for enriching us, enlightening us, contextualizing the tradition to modern times. So I have this opportunity to listen to Professor Tiwari also many years after. But you see, I use the term contextualization. How philosophy can be continue as something alive. I always consider it is alive. Philosophers is the smartest person in the world, said by Bertrand Russell, because a philosopher is always a modern person. Then what do you understand by modernity? Modernity does not mean ignoring the past totally. It is also against any kind of orthodoxy. So a person is modern, a philosopher is modern because he inherits the past. And also he claims freedom from the past. If you cannot claim freedom from the past, then you are an orthodox, you are a dead one, you are a fossil. Secondly, difficulty with our Indian philosophers, I'm referring to a 10th century text by Jayanta Bhatta. For my basic training in Nyaya in all days, Kutah Manutanam Bastumutprakshitam Skamaha Atra Bacha Binnashamatram. This is said by Jayanta Bhatta. Where do we get the new problem? But we'll have to be satisfied with the interpretation, contextualization of the old issues, perennial issues. This was said by Jayanta Bhatta in Nyaya Manjari in the 10th century text. Again, I am coming to 20th century text, an Oxford philosopher. When I was in Oxford, I was many questions I had to answer in 2015. Oxford philosopher Peter Strawson in Individuals, 1959 publication, he said the same thing there. Then where do we get new problems in philosophy? Problems are perennial. We'll have to interpret it. So interpretations is always there. So if what is said by Strawson, the giant of analytic philosophy, is very much philosophical, and what is said, if the same thing is said by the Indian philosophers, you are saying that it is not philosophical, then what kind of dogmatism in the name of philosophy you are exercising? We must be aware of the tradition, but we must not be confined ourselves to the tradition, as happened unfortunately in India in the name of philosophy, only theology and puja and worshipping, in the name of philosophy, mostly in seminars, if you go, no analysis, no explanations, nothing, only holistic, spiritualistic deliberation, just like sermons. This is the reason that to the West, we are designated as non-philosophers. This is our fault. We'll have to rectify our way of thinking. Secondly, philosophy is relevant. Who is a successful person in this world? Who is rational, who can critically analyze, who can critically explain the situation, and who is moral at the same time. So unless there is critical thinking, which is provided by philosophy, and moral thinking, for a good human being, for a successful human being, a good lesson of philosophy is very important. As in administration, many IAS officers, they do have the lessons from philosophers, and many opt for philosophy. See, the 5 successful presidents of US, all of them have philosophy majors. But our country, who are ruling, no philosophers. That's why our country is decreasing, only degrading. In the first word, our ruler would say in the morning a blatant lie, which he does not believe. So how can this country prosper? So for political philosophy also, it's very important, this logic in the one side and morality on the other side. But two must be combined. So philosophy is quite relevant. I'm happy to see that now the science students, a course nowadays, they can opt for philosophy. Especially in Calcutta University, we have enough applications from other subjects. Students are opting philosophy for critical thinking, for logical thinking, and also the ethical thinking. So we shall have to contextualize it. We see, I'm referring again to the world tradition. there is something, we have very scientific way of thinking. All these are, the Charvaka philosophy is the best philosophy in India. We have not given attention to this. It is said there, Yukti Siddham Vacha Grajyam Balad Opi Sukhad Opi. If something is said even by a child and it is rational, based on reason, it must be accepted. Yukti hinang Vacha Tejjam Briddhatopi Sukhadopi. Even if an old man is said something which is not based on evidences and reasoning, it must be abandoned, even if it is said by a scholar, renowned scholar like Shukadeva, it is said, right? So this is there in the tradition. So you'll have to choose between the two. And the interpretations my friend Professor Tiwari has given is wonderful. You know, ultimately it is the language. It is the language. All our discourse and confusions come out of when language goes on holiday. So analysis is very important. Unless we analyze, only we rely on speculation, then arises the problem. And this is not philosophy, this is theology. We must be aware of the distinction between the two. Professor Tiwari has very correctly, although he very politely started with us, you know, he took us unknowingly of us to this deep level of understanding of language. Gave us caution also. I'm very grateful to you, sir. And also to Bimal and all others. My friend Porino Silvam from the beginning to end is here and enriched us through his comments. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for giving me an opportunity to be with you. We hope during the nowadays it is I think better, this virtual meeting, you know, it is possible to meet. Otherwise the old people like us, we may not move if you invite me to be there. But in that way we can be more accessible nowadays. We shall have to use the technology, philosophy of technology nowadays. If we do not use it, we shall have to pay for this without getting benefit of this. So our philosopher young friends are energetic. I'm happy to see them. They have been using these tools. So thank you so much. Thank you each and everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. So nice.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to listen to you all, especially to you and Professor Paresh Selvam-ji. So nice.
Thank you, sir. It was very nice session, and we enjoyed the last session because all our renowned philosopher, all are capture in one windows, and we heard the informative speech, and we very impressed. Some scholar and participant are wrote there some valuable topic. They impressed for all speech, and thank you all. And presenter, is there anything else you wanted to cover before the wrap up the webinar today? If you, so you can, sir. Okay, sir. Okay. Now, I hope this answer questioning session is over now. It looks like we have covered all areas question in YouTube chat box. So concluded, I think we are good for now. Thank you, everyone. It was a very pleasure being with you all today. We have come to the end of the today's session. I would like to thank everyone who made this meeting possible, and I thank presenter for his or her presentation here. And thank you, participant, and thank you, my colleagues and everyone. Thank you once again for coming here, and we will join again tomorrow session in 12 o'clock in afternoon. And thank you again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much to all, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
So nice, sir. Thank you, Bimalji.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.